Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Raising Vibration Radio and Journey in Consciousness. I am your host, Reverend Raven, and tonight our special guest is going to be Albert C. Moore. Albert, welcome to Raising Vibration Radio.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Nice to be here.
So, I know that you're an author and you've written a book, but kind of give us a little bit of background about yourself and what type of book have you written?
Okay. I could be easily described as an idealistic dreamer. And I have a very strong creative background. My undergraduate years were at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, where I was an architecture student and took a lot of my elective credits in fine arts. And I'm very happy with that. But the creative part of me is part of my my Pisces nature. I have, for those who are knowledgeable or understanding of astrology a bit, I'm what you might call a triple Pisces. And some people ask me if I can walk down the street and chew gum at the same time, facetiously. But at any rate, I'm very proud to say that I have two sons who are also both accomplished artists in New York and in Philadelphia. So professionally, I practiced architecture for 40 years, and my specialty was really designing public buildings like town halls and police stations and fire departments and community centers, things like that, and parks. And I had a specialty in the design of the complex systems that we call our cities today. Not city planning. This is distinct from city planning. It's called urban design. It's actually the design of cities, not the planning of them. And on a metaphysical level, those who are interested in the metaphysical level, I can point to November 11th and November 13th of 1991. Those were two dates that changed my life. And the first one, on November 11th of 1991, was an experience like almost like a full body experience of floating in the universe at one with everything. I was just, you might say the easy way to say this is I was blissed out at that experience. And it was definitely fun. Then I kind of came back to earth a couple of days later when I had an experience of what can only be described as terrifying. Imagine I was living in an apartment with my then wife and two young children. And the experience I had was frightening in a lot of ways. Imagine hearing a voice in your head that says, if you don't accept the self, you're not going to make it. Over and over and over. And it just wouldn't stop. So that led me to studying shamanism and universal principles, and attending a mystery school where I studied for 2 years, studied energy work, what's called energy work. And that inspired me actually to continue to learn more and actually apply what I was learning from shamanic and my own other experiences, as well as from this study of energy work at the mystery school. And that inspired me, as well as the events of many other events in my life, inspired me to write a book called Eyes in the Mirror: Everything Changed When He Met His Soul. And that was largely inspired by the first experience of experiencing union and floating in the universe, and meeting this character that identified itself as Domini, the name of my soul. And so I published Eyes in the Mirror: Everything Changed When He Met His Soul in early 2018. And I'm currently working on a sequel to that I hope will be published in 2022. And to wrap this up, I have developed a class or a course that's kind of a combination of my creative skills and my metaphysical background. And that class is, I mentor people in what I call self-mastery. And what that means is that it's an art and a practice to diminish the voice of the ego that guides us much of the time, and guides our thoughts, feelings, and actions in a way that that keeps us in patterns of limitation. So what I have found, and I do my best to share, I don't call it teaching, but mentor what I have experienced and learned on my own. So it's not theoretical, it's very practical, but it's the art and science and art and practice of diminishing our limiting thoughts and beliefs, and remember the true creative nature of being human. And that involves developing a co-creative relationship with my soul, and the responses I get through intuition, a highly developed intuition that now guides me. And I'm very happily retired from architecture, although I would take an interesting project if it came along. And my real interest is in writing about my experiences and how my experience and my background have provided me insights into what I call the experience of a new earth. Imagine an earth where those who inhabit the earth, this new earth, feel unified with their souls, and thereby also feel unified and experience a unity with all other human beings and species, actually. So that's plays into my idealistic dreamer process. But the thing is that, unlike some other people who are blessed with the vision of insight, I also have the abilities through my architecture and urban design training to build, to plan, design, and build those cities. And in the last chapter of my book, Eyes in the Mirror, I describe what a city might look like that reflects in every aspect in the new social systems and in the new physical systems of buildings and city design and so forth, what that might look like, where it reflects the union or the oneness that all the people are experiencing. So there's a long-winded way of telling you a little bit about my background.
Wow. How hard was it to overcome the ego?
Oh, it's an ongoing process. It's not, I'm not sure that human beings ever completely diminish it. But I've developed techniques that help to put you in a state of awareness where you're aware that you are thinking, feeling, and acting on your perception of your limitation. And by recognizing that you're behaving that way, you reach a moment of choice to think, feel, and act in a different way. And so I mentor people in not only in how to recognize that egoic expression and the limitations and make a conscious choice to experience degrees of unlimitedness.
I like that. I do. I mean, that's totally amazing. So tell us a little bit about your mentoring, if you don't mind.
Not at all. I mentor people in groups these days on Zoom, and I have a class, an ongoing class that's a group of people that have been with me for 3 years now. And I would be very happy to start new groups online, and that allows people from other places. The Wednesday night group has people from the Richmond area where I live, as well as people from Florida and from Colorado, and that's very fun. And I would be very happy to start other groups. And I also do individual mentoring one-on-one for people if they would prefer to do that rather than be in a program with others.
I gotcha. So the book that you've written, is that fiction or is that based on your life story?
It is very much based on my life story, but it is categorized as fiction because some of the people I tell stories about are still living,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm glad for. And when you write something, at least I was told by the group that I retained for self-publishing, new writers have horrible difficulties in getting what's called standard publishing publishers to accept their books. And that's in the process of changing. But I really enjoy both the online program in self-mastery as well as the one-on-one practices. And the way that I combine what I call the metaphysical aspects with my creative interest is that, for instance, these people who have been working with me for 3 years now asked me to kind of redirect and redesign the program so that we could work specifically with applying the principles and practices of self-mastery to the things that they want to create or manifest in their own lives. So it's really a class on creativity. And I'll give you an example of one of the little exercises we do.
Okay.
Um, and it's fun. People tend to have fun doing this. And it comes from something I did back in the early 70s with some friends on Friday nights. And we used to do this thing called nonlinear thinking.
Okay.
And so what we do and did, what we did then and what we're doing now in this class is one exercise is to have each person say one word, just whatever comes to their mind.
Okay. Like ego.
Or whatever.
Open.
Yeah, okay, that's a word.
Right.
And then, so we've got maybe, let's say 8 words. And then I ask the group to write each of those words down and make a sentence out of them.
Okay.
And it's hysterical. So I will share with you and with the audience one of the funniest things. When I'm feeling troubled by something, one of the first things I do is I think of one of my favorite sentences that we made up back in the 70s. And that sentence was typing the toilet seat bridge. Total nonsense, right?
Right.
And so what we're doing now is this group that I'm working with in the creative process is that they're coming up with sentences that are just as silly, But what it does is it breaks us out of our linear thinking process and expands our creative potential.
That is awesome. Let me ask you this, though. I get that exercise, and we're talking about a class that you're mentoring on, releasing one's ego, so to speak, and mentoring them on that. What about things that are deeply seated or rooted in somebody's brain, like ingrained from childhood? What
Well,
type of things do you do for those type of people? Because I know you mentor on this, individuals too as well.
yeah. Well, that's a good question. And I will tell you that one of the things that I do is take the person or people through an exercise where they bring up that piece of them that's bothering them. Let's say, and in shamanic work, that's called the shadow side of the personality. You
Okay.
may have heard that term.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, one of the principles that we use or talk about a fair amount is that which we resist persists. Have you heard that?
I have all my life.
Okay. So if you resist and fight that egoic or shadow side of yourself, it's not going to work. It's just so we have an exercise of learning how to honor the shadow side of ourselves.
Okay.
So that might be like go into, close your eyes, go into your thought process and bring to mind what that shadow side looks like and what are the sensory attributes that shadow evokes in you, and feel those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then bring to mind, I emphasize the fact that from my perspective, the three creative elements in the universe are light, sound, and breath.
Okay. I
And
understand that.
and that, let's say you have brought those characteristics of the shadow side to mind, and you're feeling them. And you surround them with light in a inner vision sense. You surround them with light. And you pay attention to how they diminish in your awareness with light. And you can apply a sound, let's say like an ohm, or any other, let's say, musical note.
Right.
And you apply that sound in the light surrounding the shadow elements of yourself. And that will further diminish the shadow's potency, let's put it that way. And once you feel that potency diminished of those shadow sides, I have people bring to mind light and the attributes of light. Let's say, like in my instance, I say that I particularly identify with the qualities of tenderness and compassion. Now, it took me a long time to not only figure that out, but also how to use it and how to apply it, how to embody that those attributes. And I would call them attributes of love. And isn't love the antithesis of ego and shadow? So another kind of saying, it's not quite a principle that we talk about a lot, is that the world doesn't necessarily need healing. What it needs more than anything is love. And as they apply the light of love, or the attributes that they can identify with, to themselves, and think about the qualities of love entering every cell in their body, and it having the visual acuity to embed those qualities of love within every cell in your body.
Wow.
That is one of the first steps that I take people through to shift out of to have the cellular structure of their body replaced with love, rather than those egocentric, let's say, shadow elements. And in that way, they embody that love. And there's very little, as we embody those characteristics of love, there is very little interest or impetus to try to convince another person that your way is right. All what you do is the more you embody those elements, the more you energetically broadcast them. And then people come to you and say, well, why is your life going so well these days? So you become the example And from a metaphysical standpoint, that practice is it's the practice of Christ consciousness. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And I don't mean Christ in the Christian sense. I mean Christ as a as a being that became embodied and has the capacity to love without reason, condition, or measure. Does that make sense?
That's a hard one for a lot of people out there.
I understand, and that's why I enjoy mentoring what I do, because not that I have conquered everything, and I probably won't in this lifetime. At least I have a sense of humor about it now. Um, but the practice of it, the practice of this self-mastery process, is really rewarding. People find it rewarding, and they find that it really alters their lives in a very positive way.
Are you writing a book on self mastery that will be published?
That is my third book.
All right.
So the second, actually, mastery is probably the third or fourth at any rate. I have interest in writing more. I really do enjoy it, and I enjoy writing about using my experiences so that people know that I live this stuff. I didn't just like make it up.
Right.
And that brings me back to one of your other questions, which was about it being fiction and my book being fiction. And what I was instructed by the self-publishing company was, because many people in the stories, I had no idea how to reach anymore. And my parents are both deceased, so I couldn't ask them. I had to ask their permission to be mentioned. So they suggested that I make up names for people. And in that regard, when the names are changed like that, books then are considered fictional.
Ah.
Now, I had no idea about that, when I started writing this, and it only took me 16 years to write it. So,
So when you were writing the book, though, and it did take you 16 years, I mean, were you uninspired then that it took you so long to
no,
write it?
I was still practicing architecture,
Oh, okay.
and going through many dark nights of the soul. So I had to have those experiences and have notes about them in order to incorporate them in this book.
Wow.
So the book is really more of a memoir than it is fiction. All the stories actually happened.
I notice a lot of spiritual beings here on this planet that are writing books are going the same avenue as you. We've had an author on that had written a book, but it was about her life, but she made it into a fictional story with a fictional character and opening up about her spiritual, being
Yeah.
coming into her spiritualness and
And
everything.
it's a very common practice.
I got you. But your next couple of books, they're going to be like.
Well, the next one that I'm writing, the second one, is kind of a sequel to the first.
Okay.
And it's the second piece. And then I may write a nonfiction book on self-mastery in between the second and the third versions of the third of the trilogy of Eyes in the Mirror.
Nice. I definitely would. I really would like to purchase that book because self mastery is what we're pretty much all here on this planet to do, right? Like to love each other unconditionally, basically.
That is certainly part of it. The 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 thing I will mention, because this is really important as far as I'm concerned. Now, other people may be teaching self mastery in a different name and in a different way. But from my perspective, self mastery requires diligence and commitment to oneself. And you're not going to go through a process of achieving a level of self-mastery without those shadow pieces coming up in your face.
Right.
And in a sense, one of the things that I mentor is practices for dealing with how those shadow elements of ourselves come up in our face, and how to approach them rather than running away from them. You know that saying, or that tendency to what's it called? Fight or flight.
Yes.
Well, I spent many years doing the fight or flight aspects, and what I ultimately learned and begin to embody was the idea that when they come up and are in my face, when I'm dealing with those issues of egocentricity, such as, let's say, jealousy or envy or things like that,
Okay.
which everybody has, at least as far as I'm concerned, they do.
Right.
Everybody has some piece of it, and what self-mastery does is give you a way of seeing those things not as something to flee or fight, but as something to engage, honestly engage, and learn from it. Just think, if you have an experience that contrasts with the love that you are or you desire.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's hatred, right?
Okay.
There's a contrast to love. One of the things we explore in self-mastery is how to deal with those contrasting experiences. And when you engage and look at the contrast as love calling itself forth through this contrast, we learn to say, okay, I acknowledge that you're there. I acknowledge that this shadow element is there. What are you here to teach me? What are you here to teach me about taking my capacity to love to the next highest level of functioning?
Wow. And so this can happen to like outside circumstances.
Yeah.
Another human being projects something on you, and and instead of like fighting with them or anything like that, you would just like go in within yourself and see why is this coming up in my life right now so that you can overcome it and override that storyline, right?
Exactly. So, for instance, one of the things that we talk a lot about is how to call time out for yourself.
Okay.
And I kind of use the sports analogy. You know how when a team it needs to huddle or conference when the pitcher and the catcher need to talk and they call a timeout, right?
Right.
Okay. So what if you use that as a metaphor for when you encounter a shadow side? And what that does is that, let's say, one thought is to it's an opportunity to speak with the shadow side, which is many times in your face to protect itself. Okay.
Okay.
So what if here's an example. I have two sons. They're now in their 30s. And when my younger son, when my sons were small, and let's say their mother was traveling or something, and the daycare center wasn't available that day, I was, at that time, I was running a 20-person architectural firm just outside of New York City. And so I had to take the boys. I had no other choice, no other place to take them, but take them to work with me. And my younger son, who is now this brilliant artist, would, without fail, I would get an important phone call from my client, one of my clients. And my son, my youngest son, would invariably choose that moment, that exact moment, to demand my attention.
Oh,
Daddy,
wow.
daddy, 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 I need you now. La, 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 you know? And, you know, the shadow side of me wanted to smack the kid, right?
Right.
But there's this other part of me that I tapped into, I taught myself to tap into, and that is to speak with my son, this particular son, and say to him, you allow me to finish the conversation with this client. This client is very important to the firm that Daddy owns, as well as, in that regard, it's very important for you. This conversation is important for you. And so I spoke with him in that way and acknowledged his upsetness, or whatever you want to call it. And I said, I will be with you very shortly, and then you will have my undivided attention. And he said, okay, Daddy. And he walked away and started with his brother again, coloring on the floor. And so I look at that experience a lot like dealing with the shadow aspects of myself. Having a loving conversation with that part of myself. And invariably, it ceases that voice that tells me I can't do something, or I don't have this, or I don't have that, blah, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I speak with it in that sense, I'm calling a timeout.
Got
And
you.
once that voice is diminished enough, sufficiently, I can tap into the soul aspect of myself. And we'll do that in a minute. I'll demonstrate how that's done. And I'll start speaking to that aspect of myself that I call my soul. And I will ask for my soul's perspective on this issue.
Wow.
And then I still myself and still my voice by focusing on my breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a kind of a meditation. And within minutes, even seconds, I hear the answer to my question. That is always helpful. Like, for instance, and I don't know if you're familiar with this term, heuristic.
No, I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, heuristic teaching is teaching by asking questions so that the student or the person being mentored can answer the question for themselves.
Okay.
And in that way, the learning process sticks with the person. So heuristic sharing is how I manage my self-mastery classes. I don't provide answers to people because I don't know what their soul would say in this instance. But I show them how to go in, and I share with them how to go in and how to open up the intuition so that they can hear for themselves the answers that their soul is suggesting.
So, how quiet does one have to be able to hear our soul talking to us? Or is it from outside influences that our soul is talking to us too, if we're not getting it from, meditation or anything like that? Are we getting it from outside influences, those answers?
Let me answer that question by taking you through a little exercise.
Okay.
All right. Take your let's say thumb and middle finger and index finger on both your hands. Do you know where the xiphoid process is on your body?
No, please point that out.
Okay. If you trace your rib cage in the front of your body,
Mm-hmm.
put to the point where the rib cage meets,
Okay.
there's a little I don't know what it is. I think it's probably cartilage or something
Mm-hmm.
right in that spot. And that's what I learned through my mentors. That is called the seed of the soul. So I have a place within my body where if I follow my breath and get into a meditative state, even it doesn't have to be a deep meditative state, but I go in there and I ask my soul, will you help me and support me by speaking through my intuition about why this situation is up for me? Why am I facing this issue of arrogance again, or whatever it is?
Right.
And I just keep my eyes closed and I keep focusing my mental attention on my breath. And if I don't hear the answer shortly, What I know is that I'm putting too much mental attention on it, and I need to do something else and let it go. And
Okay.
in the letting go process, it never it always, I'll put it this way, the intuition always comes through when I have let go of my wanting to know.
That makes sense, actually.
And so self-mastery in a lot of ways is about developing a communicative relationship with that part of ourselves. And later on in our discussion, I'll get into more about that. So I hope I've answered your question.
You did. And I would like to share with our audience the video that you brought. So I'm going to take the time right now and share this video file with everybody.
Okay, and then that'll serve as more, let's say, fodder for discussion.
Okay.
From your slumber, arise from your sleep. A new day is dawning for all those who weep. The people of darkness have seen a great light. The Lord of our longing has conquered the night. Let us build the city of God. May your tears be turned into dancing. For the Lord, our light and our love, has turned the night into day. Let us build the city of God. May your tears be turned into dancing. For the Lord, our light and our love, has turned the night into day. With sons of the morning and daughters of the day, the one who has loved us has brightened our way. The Lord of all kindness has called us to be a light for the nations, to set captives free. Let us build a city of God. May your tears be turned into dancing. For the Lord, our light and our love, has turned the night into day. Let us build a city of God. May your tears be turned into dancing. For the Lord, our light and our love, has turned the turn the night into
So I want to stop that video right here and go back. It was supposed to be silent. We were all supposed to be reading. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. I want to go back because we're at the end of your video right now, right? This is basically just your contact information.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I would like to go back to this. This is very intriguing to me. This new Earth that this is what you've drawn as a new Earth. Is that correct?
It is what I call a city of oneness on New Earth.
It's like a cell.
Yes, it is modeled in part after the human cell and how the cell grows.
That is very interesting. And
So
I noticed that you put the max population 144,000, which is referenced in the Bible.
it is. A lot of the symbolism that's involved in the design of that city, and I designed it because I am a trained urban designer. It was an interest to me. What does a city of oneness look like? How does it work? I was completely fascinated with it, and I describe it in some detail at the end of my book. So
nice.
The imagine living in a place in an urban environment where it's essentially there's no crime, and that everything, both the social and physical systems of the city, reflect the human experience of oneness with everything.
Wow.
Now,
Very, very cool. I mean, the whole thing is, I see that you have these little pearls around the circumference of your circle here. I see you got the earth, the water, the fire, the earth, but then you have more pearls on the circumference.
yes, and that is a reference to John's description of the 12 gates to the city in Revelation.
Ah,
And if you recall, if you're old enough and the audience is old enough to remember that Pete Seeger actually sang a folk song that referenced the 12 gates to the city.
wow.
Now, before we go too much further with this, I would like to touch on at least the three aspects or practices that any human being can do who chooses to, that they can incorporate into their lives these three elements. The first one is that you know that each of us, although we show up in masculine and feminine bodies, we each have a masculine aspect and a feminine aspect within us. And in each person, they're more prevalent. One is more prevalent than the other. Agreed?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And can you imagine that these genders within us, these two genders within us, are the source of all human experiences of duality, of separation. it's essentially a war between masculine and feminine for dominance, in a sense. Dominance of the being that
Right.
we call a human. So imagine for a minute that those gender distinctions within each of us is completely balanced. There's no more inner war going on. If there's no more inner war going on, and the world is a reflection of each of us and our collective, then there's no more outward war. There is only the idea that, oh, the feminine aspect of me has something to share with me that will help me be the best human being I can be. So imagine men in your lives asking that question. And imagine women asking the question, what can I learn from my masculine side about how to be a better human being?
Yeah, yes, I understand that question all too well. Yes.
So in other words, you're teaching yourself to be a heuristic teacher. You're asking yourself these questions. So this gender balance thing is like the mathematical equivalent, or the equivalent to the mathematical issue in basic long division. If you're old enough to remember long division,
Oh yeah.
it's like the common denominator. This gender distinction is the common denominator to all human experiences of separation. So if you can resolve the gender wars that are going on within each of us,
Right.
then you have a tool to use for all, any other experience of separation.
That is so wild that you have brought this into light this evening, because I have noticed, especially living here in Florida, there is conflicting people with their gender, and now there's all these different types of genders out there that are separate from male and female. There's like multiples of people, what you identify now as a gender. Have you heard about that?
Oh yeah. And so what if they are in our lives these days to say, why are you identifying completely with one side of a dualistic situation? Why am I so entrenched in my masculinity as an identity? And so, in a sense, to me, what they're asking us is to look at how, if we have both of those aspects within ourselves, why don't we acknowledge them and learn from them and learn how to use them and apply them to solve all of our problems?
Yeah.
So that's the first step. The second step we've already talked about, which I've identified, is self-mastery.
Right. We've talked about that. That's what you do.
Yeah. And in that process, I also share with people how the gender situation has three components as well. The first thing is to acknowledge, to honor, and accept that I have both of those genders.
Okay.
The second step in that process is an exercise that I share with people about how to bring those two aspects of ourselves into balance. And the third piece of that aspect of bringing about a new earth is what I call the sacred marriage of the masculine and feminine within us.
And how do we do that, Al?
Do you want to take a few minutes to run through an exercise?
I would, yes, please.
Okay. So I can't see you. I know you can see me, but
Yes,
let me try to take you through this.
Okay.
So I'd ask you to stand,
Okay.
and you can stand with your feet about shoulder width apart.
Okay.
Then I'm going to ask you to bring your hands together in prayer position at your heart space.
Done.
Okay, then I'm going to ask you to drop your left hand, which is your feminine side, and extend straight outward at shoulder height, parallel to your body. Extend your right arm out all the way.
Okay.
Now, say to yourself, I honor and acknowledge my masculine aspect.
I honor and acknowledge my masculine
Aspect of myself.
Aspect of myself. Thank you.
All right. And then I want you to drop that arm and make a circle around yourself.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to bring your left hand up at shoulder height and say the same thing. I honor and accept the feminine aspect of myself.
I honor and accept the feminine aspect of myself.
Now drop that arm and make a circle around your body.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to take a little aside here. Those two circles are overlapping each other, and they are tangent to each other at their center points. Some people may have heard this idea or this term called the Vesica Pisces. The shape that's created by the two overlapping circles tangent to each other's center points is called a Vesica Pisces. That Vesica Pisces is considered to be a portal between dimensions, between heaven and earth, let's say. Okay?
Okay.
So what you're doing is you're setting up your physical vehicle as well as your psyche and your heart to communicate with the heavens. Okay?
Okay.
And the way I view the soul is completely gender neutral. Now, others may have different concepts, but that's the way I envision it. So in that little exercise, you've acknowledged and honored both sides. Now, while you're standing, bring your hands back into prayer position at your heart again. And imagine your heart being the center point of an infinity sign.
Okay.
Now imagine that infinity sign going out from your heart, starting in your heart, and going out and up on your right side, that masculine side, and down and around and back to your heart, and out the heart on your left side, and down and around and back to the heart.
Okay.
You balanced your masculine and feminine in the lateral way. Then you do the same thing by imagining making an infinity sign in the air out in front of you, and coming back around and going back through your heart and out your back side and down and around and back to the center point of your heart. Now, the third piece of this is imagine from your heart an infinity sign that comes out the front of you, out the front of your heart, and up to the heavens and around your head and back into the heart, and then back down in front of you and into the earth and back up into your heart.
Okay.
That's a balancing exercise. Now, I do each of those things 3 times each day. And what I think I have experienced, or what I have felt that I have an experience of, is that balancing of genders within me. Now, there's one other piece of this little exercise that really takes no more than 5 minutes to do, is that I imagine that I open the top of my head. It's kind of like an old-fashioned shutter in a single lens reflex camera.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how a shutter opens up. So imagine that the top of your head opens up like a shutter, and I place my hands above my head, and I bring the masculine archetypal energy down through the opening in the top of my head and all the way through my body and down through my feet. And I imagine that archetypal energy, masculine energy, going through my feet into the center of the core of the earth. And in the center of the core of the earth is the feminine archetype. And in that center of the core of the earth, the masculine and feminine archetypes are married in a sacred union. And when I feel that union, I bring that union, that sensation of union, back up through my feet, through my legs, through my torso, through my shoulders, and through the top of my head, and back into the heavens. And I say, I am the meeting place of heaven and earth.
And then what do you do after that?
And then that exercise is complete.
Okay.
And I must say that a huge balance and loving atmosphere fills all the cells of my body.
I can see why, because I was feeling that as you were talking through, and I could feel the unity and the love and the oneness and the light,
yeah.
and the strength and the energy all in one, package right there. It was beautiful.
Yeah. So that is that's the balancing aspect of the masculine and feminine within us. And then we've talked about the self-mastery. And the third piece that I've identified is what I call the new mythology. And I'm only going to tap into this a little bit at our time together. because there are other things I'd like to cover if you don't mind. And the other piece is what I call the mythology, the new mythology. And I'm just going to ask a question.
Okay.
How would your sense of duality or all your struggles, how would they, how would you be with all of that if you knew that there was nothing wrong? What if you knew that the souls of each human being were playing a game through our human existence, and that game was called the game of forgetting? So just like the contrast that ego and shadow side shows us, that there are different parts of us.
Mm-hmm.
What if our souls are playing a game of forgetting their union by becoming physical, and that game is approaching its conclusion, so that souls are learning about themselves. They're taking their self-learning deeper and deeper through our experiences of separation and duality. And what if that process is called the free will experiment? That is, the soul, through their human incarnative point, our humanity,
Mm-hmm.
is learning deeper about itself through experiencing that which it is not, separate from anything. So let me ask this. Have you ever had an experience where it was what you might call an unpleasant experience, but that in hindsight, you look back at that experience and you're saying, oh my God, my life wouldn't be the same if I had not experienced that hardship?
Yes, I can say definitely yes to that question.
So what if we as human beings, what if each of us has this light within us that we call our souls, that are playing a game through human existence, only to come to a point in human evolution where human beings remember their oneness? What might that be like?
Especially if we all did it at the same time.
Well, yeah, and just like any other energetic process, what if a critical mass of people remember this, and that acts like kind of like a rubber band? When a rubber band is expanded to its full extent,
Mm-hmm.
what happens? The opposite end comes in, and the rubber band, goes off into the wild blue yonder. It's kind of, so what if the vanguard of people, those experiencing and remembering union, are the vanguard for the rest of humanity? Not that they're any better than anybody else,
right?
but that they are those who have remembered or begun to remember, actually exude that remembrance energetically to bring others along. Is there any reason to convince anyone of your rightness?
No.
So can you see and feel how that process could, let's say that mythology, there's some accuracy to it, right?
Right.
Now, I've come to this idea after 30 years of disciplined study of these kinds of phenomena. Now, I don't expect everybody else to be as self-disciplined as I am about it. That would be rather arrogant. And it's probably highly unlikely, you know. But the point that I'm making is that what if there's something called a grand design where human beings realize that they have a soul that's playing a game of forgetting who they are in order to better appreciate who they are. Would that change your worldview?
Oh, yes. In a heartbeat.
So, to me, something like that is a potential new mythology or anthropology, maybe even.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you that by remembering that as a mythology or anthropology, I've got a much better sense of humor about the world than I ever had. So in effect, I'm laughing a whole lot more. I'm laughing at what I call silly human stuff. Our tendency to separate from ourselves, from other human beings, from the earth and her creatures, and from a common creator that we've all come from.
Right.
And when that sense of separateness dissolves within the human psyche and the human heart and is replaced by the remembering of oneness, life is going to be a whole lot different. And that's what I'm interested, that's what I say is my purpose in life, is to write about this. And for those with ears to hear and open minds, I'm happy to talk with them.
Oh, I love it. I mean, what you brought a smile to my face tonight. I love the remembering of the oneness of everybody. The fact that talking to our shadow selves and finding out what their answer is from them for us to become one and whole within ourselves is such a beautiful reminder here.
It's really the whole thing, and self-mastery is all about what you might call self-responsibility. If there's truth to the saying that you can't change somebody else, I read something many years ago by Pablo Neruda. You might know him as a Chilean poet.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his most famous sayings is, "Changing the world is an inside job."
Yes.
Well, I took that on as my mission. And that is in part why I share the self-mastery processes that I've developed. And would you mind if I gave people my email and a couple ways that they can either buy my book or tap into some of the readings, the things that I've written?
No, be my guest. I have it posted on the description page, but right now the video is still up on that last page.
Oh, okay.
So
Then I
people
don't
can
need to
see
say
your
anything.
email and your website and your book information.
Yeah. And that's fine. I don't need to say anything if that's up.
Yes, it is up for my audio listeners though. If you go to Blue Space Creations at wordpress.com, that is his blog website. And the book website is info hyphen eyesinthemirror.com
Yes. And
is
don't
the
forget the www dot.
okay, you need the www dot. So www.info-eyesinthemirror.com. It's also on Amazon, isn't it?
It is, but Amazon jacks up the price a lot.
Okay. So then for all you audio listeners out there, just go to that website I mentioned to purchase Albert's book. And we're definitely going to have him back on the show when he writes his second book on here.
Okay.
We definitely want to have him on here. Albert, is there anything else that you would like to discuss before we close down the show? Because it just flew by really fast.
Yeah, not really. I just thank you very much. I haven't been on uh, on any kind of media like this in many years. I used to have a radio program in Santa Fe at WKSFR, I think it was. But at any rate, thank you very much. This has been a great pleasure for me to be with you.
Oh, it was our pleasure to have you on here and thank you for your time. Well, with that, folks, we're going to end the show tonight. Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of Raising Vibration Radio and Journey in Consciousness. You have a great evening and hope to see you back here next Saturday night. Bye now.